Welcome. Today we are going to speak to you about two newspapers, Mail on Sunday, which will be presented by Ollie, and News on Sunday, which will be presented by Daisy. One was a huge success, Mail on Sunday, and one was a huge failure, News on Sunday. We are going to speak to you today about the factors and the decision that made one a success and one a failure.
Okay, in terms of the background of each of the newspapers, so the News on Sunday was launched in April 1987. They aimed for intellectual political writing, and they took a left-wing stance in terms of politics. They claimed to want to promote equal opportunities. In order to do this, they needed to raise a start-up capital of £6.5 million. They did this by a huge number of different sources, mainly trade unions and local pension funds.
The Mail on Sunday was set up by Associated Newspapers in May 1982. It was intended to be a sister paper to the Daily Mail, which is a leading UK daily newspaper at this point in time. It took a right-of-centre political stance and aimed to appeal to the mass market.
Okay, so as a metaphor, we'll be using a snakes and ladders game to compare the progress of both News on Sunday and Mail on Sunday. So as you can see in the blue circle represents Mail on Sunday, and the red circle represents News on Sunday. And so at the start, we see both of them advancing. Mail on Sunday advances a step further because it was a sister paper to the Daily Mail and they had an established brand. And for News on Sunday, they go by 8, and they were a step back because even they were new. They were a new company, but they still managed to raise £6.5 million to start out their paper. So the different fates of the two papers could be attributed to three main factors, which we have placed into location, experience, and government.
Okay, so in terms of location, News on Sunday moved from Fleet Street to Manchester, and the reason why they did this was because they wanted to represent a different viewpoint. However, the fact that they moved away from London suggests to us that they've moved away from the hub of political action, so it may have been detrimental to the qualities of the stories that they were producing.
Alternatively to this, the Mail on Sunday chose to remain in Fleet Street, London. This was the centre of UK journalism at the time, and being here meant that they had a first-hand view of all the latest stories coming from Westminster.
Okay, in terms of experience, few staff at the News on Sunday had prior experience. They were all experiencing a new job at the time. And they also chose politics over ability. And what I mean by that is the News on Sunday would pick people who had, say, a disability to write for their paper over someone who had experience in journalism. So they would hire people with no background in journalism whatsoever and actually turn away experienced writers, which may have produced much better quality articles.
And despite having separate teams of journalists and separate offices to their sister paper, the News on Sunday was part of Associated Newspapers, and this was an undeniable advantage. Lord Rothermere, the chairman, oversaw the whole operation. He had orchestrated the overhaul of the Daily Mail previously and was well aware of how to run a successful newspaper. In addition to this, David Shrimpsley, the first editor of the Mail on Sunday, had already edited the News of the World and the Sun previously to this. With regard to the importance of experience in terms of management theory, we can relate to Peter Drucker's knowledge worker theory. He coined the phrase knowledge worker, referring to the need within a company to have a highly experienced member in the company's line of work. Lord Rothermere took this position within the Mail on Sunday, however this was not present in the News on Sunday.
We're going to show you an extract of a video taken from a BBC4 documentary about News on Sunday to show you how inexperienced was the staff.
Everybody seemed to end up with a job they hadn't done before. Was there some notion that if you wanted to do something in a different way, it's a good idea to put people in posts who haven't done it before?
No, not at all. In fact, I think that's kind of a bit unfair. Actually, where people had to have a particular knowledge base, I think they had a particular knowledge base.
I was head of personnel and equal opportunities.
And had you done that job anywhere before?
No.
Had you ever been foreign editor on a national paper before?
I'd never been foreign editor of any national newspaper.
Did you have any experience of working on a tabloid?
No, I'd never worked on a national tabloid.
Had you ever worked on a tabloid before?
No.
And had you ever worked in personnel before?
No.
Had you ever been editor-in-chief of a national newspaper?
No.
Had you ever been sales director on a national newspaper?
Never.
Had you been the editor of a national newspaper before?
No.
You said you knew how to do spreadsheets, but you'd never actually worked within a company looking after the finances of a company before in that way?
No.
So you'd never had a job in computing before?
No.
Had you actually had a job in marketing ever before?
No, but again, it's the sort of skill you pick up.
You became the chief executive.
I became the chief executive.
Was that a job you'd ever done before?
No.
Okay, so I think that proves that the paper was a shambles from the start. So next we'll be talking about government. So at the time that News on Sunday was launched, the Conservatives were in power and Margaret Thatcher was at their head. But however, so you might suggest there might not have been a demand for the left-wing political newspaper. However, there actually was, because there was growing anti-Thatcherism among that time, so there was a demand for that newspaper. However, we feel that they might have just gone at too extreme left-wing stance, and the reason why we believe this is The Independent was launched at a similar time to the News on Sunday, but they took a middle ground in terms of politics, and they're a huge success. So it might have suggested to us that maybe the News on Sunday were just too extreme and it wasn't marketable at that time.
The Mail on Sunday opted for a right-of-centre stance. This was in keeping with their aim to appeal to the mass market, as they weren't trying to force extreme views through their articles.
So as a summary, we see Mail on Sunday advance due to the competitive advantage they had over News on Sunday because of experience. And we see News on Sunday falling because they made bad decisions based on location, and they had, inexperienced workers. So both newspapers faced their different challenges, and so we will recognize and compare different survival strategies and how effective they were, and we have categorized it into product, established branding, and vision.
Okay, so in terms of News on Sunday, it was more of a lack of a quality product. So their first edition was extremely criticised, and they completely failed to meet their target circulation figures. So to try and counteract this, they brought in BBH, an advertising firm at the time, but who were seen to be extremely trendy. However, they hadn't actually worked on tabloids before, and so they hadn't had the experience in that industry, so got the target market wrong.
Despite Mail on Sunday's success today, they were not initially a runaway success. They aimed for their first edition to have a readership of 1.25 million, however by the 7th edition they were only at around 700,000. Lord Rothermere, the chairman, instantly picked up on this and intervened. He recognised that it wasn't just the branding and the marketing of the paper that needed to be improved, it was the product itself. He brought in a new editor, David English, and introduced supplements to the paper. There was a cooking supplement, a cartoon pullout, a new magazine which focused on lifestyle. This meant that the paper appealed to a wider proportion of the market.
Okay, in terms of branding, yet again, News on Sunday is more of a lack of branding. Due to the fact that they raised 6.5 million of their capital from a huge number of investors, little bits of money from all sorts of places, no one actually had a common goal because there was no dominant investor. So this actually meant that it was very much a confusion among the branding and the brand vision.
As we've already mentioned, the Mail on Sunday was set up by Associated Newspapers, who had been running the Daily Mail since 1896. The fact that the Mail on Sunday was incorporated under the brand of this successful paper was an undeniable advantage in establishing a loyal readership. The prominence of branding within this case study is echoed by the management theorist Clifton. He wrote that branding needs to start with a clear point of view on what an organisation should be about and how it will deliver a sustainable competitive advantage. Then it is about organising all product, service and corporate operations to deliver that.
Okay, next is vision. So, as I said earlier, News on Sunday wanted to focus on equal opportunities. However, their slogan was no tits and a lot of balls. So that suggests to us a bit of a sexist comment, and it's kind of contradicting the fact that they're saying they're all about equal opportunities, because that slogan is contradicting that. Secondly, the fact that they said they wanted to write about intellectual political writing, and then their first edition, on the very first page, It was talking about organ donations and trading organs in Brazil. Again, this suggests to us that their vision was extremely lost because they were not sticking to what their aims of the paper were.
Mail on Sunday's vision was to appeal to the mass market. Their right-of-centre political stance fitted in with this, as it had a wide appeal due to the government in the UK at this point in time. Despite this, adjustments were made to ensure that the paper remained in keeping with their original vision. This is seen through the addition of supplements that we talked about earlier, as it further widened the paper's appeal and brought in more readership as a result of this. And this is just a quick slide to kind of demonstrate that people don't really want to read about Marxist politics over their Sunday breakfast, so perhaps the news on Sunday wasn't quite heading in the right direction.
Okay, so we're going to show you a couple of figures that represent the circulation. So this figure on the top left here is News on Sunday, and that is what they needed to break even. That's how many editions they needed to sell to break even, and that was their target circulation for the first edition.
So the blue circle we see here is the Mail on Sunday's aim for their first edition.
Okay, this is what they actually achieved for News on Sunday, so 500,000. So from the very start we see that they weren't actually meeting their aims and their targets.
And on the Mail on Sunday, we don't have figures for the first edition, however we do know that by the 7th edition they were on around 700,000.
And for the News on Sunday on the top right here, 200,000, that was for the 8th edition, so you can see a steady decline from the 1st to the 8th.
And the 1.7 million there stands for the readership of the Mail on Sunday today.
So, the Snakes and Ladders, Mail on Sunday was not successful from the start, but they did improve and maintain a higher readership than News on Sunday, so we see them advance. And News on Sunday actually had a poor start, and they received many criticisms on their first edition, and so we see them fall. The use of management theory, it shows the outcomes that how the outcomes of the two papers could have been differentiated, and so we have separated the theories mainly into leadership, structure, and conflict management.
Okay, so for leadership we use Blake Moot on grid. You can see the News on Sunday down there and the Mail on Sunday at the top here. So the News on Sunday, unfortunately, is in the impoverished section. So they have low concern for people and low concern for production, which pretty much sums up the ethos of the company. They had no channel of communication, no job titles, no chain of command. And due to the fact there was no established leader in the company, no one knew who they were subordinate to or who they were looking up to. So it made it extremely difficult among the workforce.
As you can see, we placed the Mail on Sunday in the team leader category. This is because they had a high concern for people and a high concern for production. Their high concern for people was exhibited through the fact that they allocated tasks to their workers regarding ability, so they got the best that they could out of the workers that they had. And their concern for production was shown by the fact that editors had very clear objectives that they had to meet. Okay,
in terms of, we looked at smart objectives for each of the companies. So when you make an objective for a company, they should fall under these criteria: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-related. However, News on Sunday didn't have any structure or criteria when they made all of their objectives. So actually, they just didn't meet any of the criteria whatsoever.
In Mail on Sunday, we can see that they did consider the SMART acronym when they were making decisions. This was shown through their decision to overhaul the product of the newspaper, as what they did conform to this SMART objective.
Organizational structure. We will be using Henry Mintzberg's organizational configurations to assess the structure of both newspapers. I'm so sorry. Structure is very important as it integrates an organization's strategies, the environment, and communication together with the type of organization in order to drive efficiency. So for both newspapers, a machine organization would fit best as it has formal routines and procedures as well as functional departments.
Okay, so for the News on Sunday, there was no hierarchy, so no one was manager to anyone else. They were all working for their own individual goals, so it wasn't as if they were working as a team together for the common goals of the newspaper. They were all working individually and writing their own stories. So this just shows a lack of decision-making and workforce confusion.
And we believe that the nature of a newspaper company requires there to be a clear hierarchical structure in place. This was present in the Mail on Sunday, as everybody knew who they were reporting to and the chains of command were very well recognised.
Okay, secondly, in terms of management, we looked at the conflict in the workplace. For the News on Sunday, there was a huge conflict among some of the editors. So a previous editor, Hilda and Hailing, they actually went against the current editor of the newspaper, and they made it a competition. They both said, we'll make a dummy newspaper, and then we'll see whose is better, which seems a bit petty to all of us. However, it still managed to go ahead. It was a waste of time, valuable time that the paper could have used to put, if they worked together, could have used to put together a real quality paper. But instead, they made it a competition. It shows, in terms of management, that there should have been someone controlling this. There should have been a leader and someone to oversee this situation and control it.
The leadership hierarchy which was present within the Mail on Sunday meant that they just avoided conflict altogether. The fact that Lord Rothermere oversaw all operations was hugely helpful in this. When the newspaper wasn't initially a success, he was able to bring in a new editor and improve the product without having conflict.
And so once again, we see Mail on Sunday advance because they were able to reinvent themselves and go from strength to strength. And for News on Sunday, they go back to the start because of their management problems, which caused them really huge losses.
I think one of the most important things in a company is the ability to solve problems.
And so in conclusion, I think that the most important factor which led to the success of the Mail on Sunday was the fact that it was part of Associated Newspapers, which gave it a clear brand vision and made that it was part of a company who knew how to run a newspaper.
I think the main reason for the failure of News on Sunday was the fact there was no structure, because no one was working together as a team, and it made it extremely difficult to meet an aim or a goal.
In my opinion, I felt that conflict management was one of the main driving forces of News on Sunday's failure, as the tension and disharmony that the editors created actually made everything fall apart.
Thank you very much for listening. Is there any questions?